A few days ago, we talked in another video about the true ending of the Divergent saga, the one that differs from what we saw on the big screen and wasn't adapted into the movies due to their abrupt cancellation. By the way, you might want to check out that video first to avoid spoilers. In that video, we covered the ending of the literary trilogy, but there's actually a fourth book, or rather, a short story, that Veronica Roth wrote as a second epilogue. In it, she delves into Four's life after Triss's death and how he managed to move forward without her. And that's exactly what I'm going to share with you in this video. Now, without further ado, let's dive into the story. 5 years after the events of Allegiant, Tobias and Christina were getting ready for a big event. That day marked the 5th anniversary of the fall of the factions in Chicago, and this wasn't just any event. It was a reunion for those who had once been part of that divided world. A moment to celebrate the changes, but also to mourn everything that had been lost. Christina, with her loose curly hair and that unmistakable dauntless vibe, asked Tobias point blank, "Are you going?" The reunion was going to be held in the old Dauntless headquarters, a place filled with both good and bad memories. Tobias had attended a few of these gatherings before, but this time it felt different. It felt more significant. With her natural curiosity, Christina brought up something she'd heard from Zeke. According to him, Tobias had been visiting the Dauntless headquarters frequently. At first, Tobias tried to deflect the topic with vague answers, but Christina wouldn't let it go. Eventually, Tobias came clean. He went there for a very specific reason: the fear landscape. For him, it was like a form of therapy, a way to confront himself. However, Christina wasn't convinced. She bluntly told him it didn't make much sense if nothing ever really changed. That's when Tobias opened up even more. He admitted that whenever he entered the fear landscape, he saw Triss. He saw her die, over and over again, in those simulations. And even though it was excruciating, he kept going back, hoping that one day the fear would fade. Only then, he believed, would he truly be able to move on. Christina looked at him seriously and said something only someone like her could. Time doesn't heal everything on its own. If he truly wanted to leave the past behind, he needed to act. He needed to take the step he'd been so afraid to take. Tobias, as always, was lost in his thoughts. His old fears had changed since Triss's death, but they were no less crushing. Now he feared different things: falling from an airplane with no hope of survival, standing paralyzed as a dark force destroyed everyone he loved, enduring unbearable pain with no end in sight, and the cruelest of all, watching Triss die again and again. Deep down, he knew her death was final, that it couldn't happen again. But his mind replayed that moment on an endless loop, as if to ensure the pain stayed fresh. That pain trapped him, holding him back. That night, Tobias decided to walk through the streets of Chicago. It was better than staying at home, trapped with his thoughts. The city was changing, adapting to its new life without factions. Former faction members, the factionless, and migrants from other cities now lived in a place still under reconstruction, but slowly coming back to life. As he walked toward the Dauntless headquarters, he saw familiar faces. There was Zeke, always full of energy, and Shauna, now standing tall, thanks to an implant. Christina was there too, along with Caleb, Triss's brother. Tobias felt a sharp pang when he saw Caleb. It was still hard to look him in the eye. He couldn't help but blame him, at least a little, for what had happened to Triss. Yet, at the same time, he knew holding on to that resentment wouldn't help. So, in an effort to avoid any confrontation, they exchanged nothing more than a curt nod. It was the best they could do for now. When Tobias reached the Dauntless headquarters, everything felt strange. The place, once brimming with memories and meaning, had changed completely. The chasm, with its constant roar and intimidating presence, was now a carefully designed tourist attraction, complete with lit pathways and areas designed for visitors. Everything had been restored, clean, polished, and perfect. And to Tobias, it felt hollow. This place had once been his, a part of who he was. Now it felt like it belonged to someone else, to a city he could barely recognize. Despite that lingering sense of disconnection, Tobias tried to blend in. He greeted old acquaintances like Kara and Matthew, who eagerly shared their big news. They were engaged. It was a happy announcement, a reminder that life was moving forward, that people were building new futures. Yet, as those around him seemed to progress, Tobias couldn't help but feel stuck, still clinging to the past, to everything he had lost. Evelyn, his mother, was there too. Their relationship had improved over time. At least, it wasn't as tense as it once had been. But that didn't mean there weren't moments of friction. At one point, Evelyn told him that Tris would have wanted him to move on, as if she could somehow know. The comment struck a nerve. How could anyone speak for Tris? No one could. No one truly knew what Tris would have wanted, and hearing those assumptions only reopened old wounds for Tobias. To him, Tris wasn't just a memory. She was an ache that refused to heal. During the gathering, Tobias and Christina found a moment to talk alone, and as always, she didn't mince words. She told him he was too young to stay stuck in the past. Tobias listened quietly, but her words lingered in his mind. Christina wasn't asking for miracles or giving him empty platitudes. She was simply encouraging him to take a step, any step, to start moving forward. And she did it in her own practical, matter-of-fact way, as if saying, "You can do it, but only when you're ready." A little later, Christina invited Tobias to join a training session with the security force. True to form, Tobias hesitated at first. He wasn't sure if he wanted to revisit that part of his life, to teach again, to become the four that everyone seemed to expect him to be. But after giving it some thought, he agreed. Maybe it was because Christina had asked, or maybe it was because something inside him was beginning to shift. During the training, it all started to fall into place again. Tobias remembered what it felt like to be an instructor in Dauntless, the sense of fulfillment that came from guiding others and correcting their movements. There was a comfort in the routine, in the familiarity of the exercises. Christina was there beside him, and together they managed the trainees as if they'd never stopped. At the end of the session, when everyone else had left, Tobias and Christina shared a quiet, intimate moment. A lingering look, a brief touch of hands, a connection that spoke louder than words. And then, a kiss. At first, it was quick, hesitant, uncertain. But then it deepened, slow, soft, like a question finally answered. There was no need to say it out loud. Both carried scars that still hurt. But in that moment, they found in each other a reason to begin healing, to start moving forward. Over time, Tobias and Christina's relationship evolved into something unique, built on understanding, support, and above all, humor. They started living together. Tobias still dreamed of Tris and still confronted his fears, but Christina was there, showing him that despite everything, he could live a full life. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about learning to live with the pain, finding a place for it in his new reality. Together, they faced life one day at a time. From ridiculous arguments over whose turn it was to do the dishes, to moments when both felt raw and broken. The Fear Landscape Serum, which had once been so significant to Tobias, gradually lost its meaning. Eventually, he gave it to Kara to use in her experiments, a symbol that he no longer needed to confront his fears in the same way. Christina, on the other hand, kept a vial of memory serum in her cabinet, not to use, but as a reminder of how close she had come to losing everything and how far they had come since then. Amid all the challenges, they found joy in the simple things. The laughter they shared over something silly, arguments that always ended in smiles, and the comfort of knowing they were there for each other. Tobias worked on projects to improve the city, repairing streets and buildings, while Christina continued training the security force. Though their paths were different, they were moving in the same direction. Over time, they learned that healing wasn't about erasing scars, but living with them. Together, they discovered that while the past would always be a part of them, they could build something new and beautiful from what remained. And somehow that was enough. Let me know in the comments what other topics you'd like to see covered on the channel. And remember, if you enjoy this type of video, the best way to support me is by leaving a like, subscribing, and turning on the notification bell. See you in the next video.